Okay, so we're going to actually cover this. Well, we were thinking of covering it last week. Leaks emerged via Moore's Law is Dead of a new console APU, presumably a console APU codenamed Magnus, which looks like a quite extraordinary design, a kind of custom SoC with bespoke graphics core and CPU core, kind of melded together with like a bridge. So really interesting stuff. Now, we weren't really, how can I say this? We didn't really have too much to say about it. There were a lot of question marks about it, but there has been some clarification emerging this week, and reputable sources coming forward with a bit more clarification about what's going on. It does look as though Magnus is part of the next generation Xbox lineup. And there's some fascinating qualities to it, right, Oliver?
Yes, it's very interesting. And I'll go through some of those qualities now. But yeah, initially it was kind of a curious situation because I didn't really know what to make of it exactly, but there's been some more information that's come out recently about the design, and some information has been rumored out there. It's basically a dual chip design with, I think, about a 264 millimeter squared GPU die, and I think about 140 millimeter squared CPU die. On the CPU die, you have 3 Zen 6 cores and apparently 8 Zen 6C cores, so probably similar to the Zen 6 core design, but with less cache there, much less cache than those on those parts. On the GPU die, you have a memory bus that was initially reported out as 384 bits, but now it seems like it might be 192 bits there with GDDR7. In terms of the GPU configuration, there's some talk of it potentially being 68 CUs. That's the number that's floating about, or something in that range apparently has been estimated. So yeah, I think it's an interesting design. It's certainly an ambitious design from a die size area perspective. That is a considerably larger design in terms of its total configuration, its total size, than the PlayStation 5 APU, Series X, PS5 Pro, 1X, PS4 Pro, PS4. It's a bigger design than all those historical console APUs. But apparently this isn't necessarily the biggest part in this line, because the more intriguing aspect of this is the fact that apparently this so-called GPU die, this AT2 die, apparently, according to some documentation, is part of a family of GPU dies that apparently, I mean, possibly, again, take this with a grain of salt, possibly will comprise AMD's next generation graphics architectures, where maybe you'll have some ability to mix and match these graphics dies across products. So in that case, you could potentially see an Xbox with a larger graphics die than this, or potentially even a smaller graphics die than this. Again, this presumably being kind of the mid-range component within that stack. It seems like it might be the mid-range component within that stack. Earlier, maybe we thought it was the higher-end component, but it seems like maybe there's a much higher-end component potentially that would presumably be primarily intended for the PC market. But given this kind of mix and match, swapping of graphics dies kind of product lineup here, we could potentially see that in the Xbox as well. There's just one final note of caution here. The broad strokes of this approach seem to have pretty good sourcing, but the super nitty-gritty specifics are a little bit hazier, and of course plans are subject to change. So I think this is very likely that this will be Xbox's next generation strategy, but some of the details may be different in the actual finished products. So yeah, just some interesting details here. I'm not sure how that'll play out in the market necessarily. It's a very interesting design, potentially a very powerful design, and intriguingly, it gives Microsoft potentially the ability to mix and match these dies and potentially upgrade on a more frequent basis than we've traditionally seen in the console sphere, where you have like a 7-year console life cycle, and then at that midpoint, you kind of stick a refresh in there potentially, as we've seen for the last 2 console generations. This is maybe a more iterative kind of approach to a console, quasi-console-like design.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the way I see it is that it's, how can I say it without upsetting people? I see it as Microsoft basically moving away from what you would consider a traditional console-like design, which is like a monolithic APU, which is a specific size for budget reasons, right? And doesn't, it's always about a balance of performance and cost. Now, what this design seems to indicate is that, first of all, this chip does look expensive. But secondly, it also gives Microsoft potential flexibility to actually marry up any of AMD's specific graphics GPU designs with a CPU to turn it into effectively an APU or SoC, right? So in theory, Microsoft could spin up whatever kind of Xboxes they want to. And you're right, Oliver, if they are essentially going to be carrying this forward into future AMD architectures, then conceivably this sort of design could move on with every single AMD generation there is. Now, why would this happen? It's because I think Microsoft wants to move away from what is the traditional console generation and basically move more into phase with what's happening on PC. And that kind of makes sense from my perspective because the PC market is huge, and the potential here for just producing a series of quote unquote Xboxes for various market sectors within the PC arena, just makes a lot of sense, right? It's a completely different strategy to what Sony's doing. There's no real point to be competing with what Sony's doing these days. Just kind of makes sense. And from AMD's perspective, well, they've never really been able to break through in the graphics space against NVIDIA. Let's be clear about that in terms of market share. So the concept of being able to ship entire PCs / Xbox PCs, if you will, that could potentially be complete systems at quite reasonable price points. I mean, here's the thing, right? You look at how much a pre-built costs these days with an NVIDIA GPU, Intel or AMD CPU. It's not cheap, but you've got this, condensed design that could potentially be significantly cheaper. This could be great news, not just for Xbox PCs, but also for AMD in terms of, shifting hardware, right? There's a lot going on here. I think looking at the leaked design, one thing which sort of caught my eyes is that the graphics die, I think, was it, Oliver, about 267 square millimeters is the
264, I think.
264.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. The PlayStation, I mean, this is apparently a 3 nanometer part, if I'm understanding things correctly. The PS5 Pro APU on 4 nanometers is like 270, 280, I think. If there's, and that's got 60 CUs, I'm assuming 64 with 4 disabled. So all I can really say is on this new process node, if this is the 82 chip with 68 CUs, then those CUs must have a lot more logic in them. And therefore, the stuff the rumors that we've been hearing about big rasterization uplifts, potential for huge uplifts to ray tracing, machine learning, etc., all kind of comes together in terms of how this leak is sort of shaping up. So I guess from there, the question is, when's it going to happen? And if it's going to happen in concert with when RDNA 5 is going to launch, that's not going to be too far away. So, Xbox could be stealing a march on Sony then. But at the same time, I guess the question is, we're still couching things in terms of Sony versus Microsoft, when I think the whole sort of discussion is going to be changing when we actually see the price points of these things. It's possibly more likely going to be the cost of an Xbox PC versus a traditional pre-built with an AMD / NVIDIA design. So radical, but potentially rather exciting, potentially very performant, which is what we want to see. And I'm excited. I'm here for this. It's looking pretty impressive, assuming it all pans out. I mean, there's a lot of reading the tea leaves here, so to speak. But yeah, exciting stuff. Thoughts, John?
Well, I have one question for you, Rich. Do you think Xbox Magnus can run GTA 6 at 60 frames per second? That's the question on everyone's mind.
I think so.
That's a good question.
I guess we'll find out. No, yeah. I mean, this is really interesting stuff, and it all sort of aligns with what we were kind of thinking about the future of Xbox. And when you talk about the sort of more modular design, that actually makes a lot of sense for what we've been thinking, right? Because it gives them that flexibility to sort of customize the box according to the price point they want to target. I guess what's interesting, though, is, so I'm imagining like a line of Xbox-based hardware, right? Similar to what they do with Surface, But it's interesting that Surface has pivoted fully towards ARM, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Xbox would obviously not be doing that right now. So it kind of creates this interesting sort of like, I don't know, mix within Microsoft's own hardware lineup. And I'm curious to see how that would shake out then. But I mean, ARM is not really an option here, I would say. We've talked about this before. I mean,
not if you're going to be running Steam storefronts on it.
No. That's exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious to see how it goes. I'm curious to see what the price points look like. I mean, theoretically, they could still try to get some more affordable boxes out of this, but it seems like given the size and everything, I'd be curious to see how low the entry-level Xbox PC might be. And what the high end looks like, but yeah, we'll wait and see.
I think more expensive is inevitable.
I think that's probably right.
But at the same time, they are seemingly shifting where they're actually, which market they're addressing here. And I think it kind of makes sense. I still think at the lower end, there is likely to be some sort of still a monolithic APU for, smaller devices, potential handhelds, etc. We're obviously seeing the Z2 Extreme in the Xbox ROG Ally X. I do think we'll still continue to see those smaller APUs put together, but it looks as though with what we're seeing with Magnus, it's a more comprehensive solution for scaling an entire stack of devices. I mean, I guess at that point, how many Xboxes do you need? I suspect just a super high-end one, a mainstream one, and then whatever there is for handheld. But in theory, that they could produce whatever they want, based on this.
So what do you think the ROG Ally stuff, the Ally X means for this potential lineup here? Because, one would assume maybe that they would be aiming for a proper like Microsoft branded line of hardware. Or do you think that they're going to be working primarily with third parties like Asus and whatnot to create these sort of devices that are Xbox themed, but not actually like proper Microsoft developed devices?
I think that the concept of hooking up with OEMs would extend to the entire stack. You could indeed have an Asus Xbox based on a Magnus style chip. I think there's no reason why not. Because I think the other thing about the PC market is the diversity of options out there, and there's a market for that kind of thing. So
So effectively, what is happening here is that Microsoft is actually going to be executing on the original 3DO model, right? And they've done it in a roundabout way because the basis of all these machines is Windows, which is a Microsoft product, right?
Yeah.
And then they're just like, siphoning down to focus on Xbox for these products, right? But the idea is that, the back end, the support, that's all Microsoft based. And then other companies can create hardware around that, which is exactly what Trip Hawkins tried to do with the 3DO before it was possible, I guess you could say. But if they can pull this off, then this stands to be pretty lucrative, I would say.
Yeah.
Because they're like freeing themselves from the shackles of the traditional console market and sort of spreading out their wares amongst a much larger base without having to invest in the same amount of like hardware development and support that they've had to in the past, right? Like this kind of the Xbox 360 Red Ring situation, for instance, would not really be a thing in this new world, right?
I think they learned a lot of lessons from that straight after the Red Ring.
No doubt, but it's just interesting to see it evolve, and of course, everything being an Xbox, that also includes competing consoles, which maybe they're not even considered competing anymore after this point, right? It's more like just other places for their software to land.
Right. So, I think another thing, I don't know what you think about this, Oliver, but there's almost like consolidation around Windows, and I think Windows kind of needs that consolidation. It needs shoring up because the competition from SteamOS is highly significant.
I do think that they need that kind of consolidation to force Microsoft's hand to make Windows a better gaming OS in general. Certainly a better OS for gaming uses on controller devices, not on the mouse and keyboard. I think that definitely needs to improve a lot here. And when you look at like the initial effort with the Xbox ROG Ally, Asus ROG Xbox Ally, I'm losing track of that one. They're doing quite a lot there. I still think they have a lot of ground to cover. shader compilations will potentially issue, wake sleep.
Yeah.
Lots of issues down the line that Microsoft needs to address beyond just the narrow kind of interface concerns that you might have when you're using a gamepad. But I would expect this effort would try to tackle all those problems in a way at least as comprehensive as the Steam Deck, if not aiming a little bit higher than that in the end for these products, because obviously this is a big push for Microsoft. And if this is going to be their kind of competing line with Sony, even if the prices are a bit higher, I think they really do need to nail that effort and actually make this a really good console-like operating experience, because so far Windows is definitely not that. No matter how many things you throw into it, it's not quite that at the moment.
I mean, I do still have concerns about the Asus Xbox ROG Ally, primarily that it's arriving ahead of time before RDNA 5. I mean, RDNA 5 does seem to be like a fundamental shift, a proper generational leap. It seems to be, targeting things like machine learning in a way that the existing hardware doesn't. So I am wondering the extent to which there will be longevity for the Ally X based on, it's fundamentally still an RDNA 3.5 GPU, as I understand it. That does slightly concern me. I do wonder whether it is kind of like a sort of frontier device, if you like, because there's a lot of work that needs to happen with Windows, and it does help if there's, a target device to build it around. But the extent to which the Ally X and especially the entry level Ally, tricky. I think.
Thinking of that, Rich, what do you think all of this looks like for the Xbox One line of devices, right? Which is a through line through the Xbox Series consoles. Do you think this is just like the end of that line, or that it'll sort of slowly trickle off and development support dries up and then it's just gone? Like, what does this look like to you?
Yeah, I think that's basically what you just said. Xbox One, I think, is kind of like pushing up the daisies at this point. Series consoles, though, there's probably going to be something. If I had to just hazard a guess, when you look at what the GDK did in kind of unifying development for PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series devices, it will probably work in a similar way to that.
So based on their strategies with Xbox Series, then regarding backwards compatibility, I suppose this would mean that we should be getting hopefully 360, original Xbox, etc., and potentially, I don't know, Xbox One compatible. What do you think? Because backwards compatibility has been very important to them, right?
Well, what do you think, Oliver? Because I reckon it's the case that all of this next generation stuff, Microsoft's committed to backwards compatibility.
Exactly.
With AMD at the hardware level there. So it should just be a thing, right? I think the only one that's a bit of a question mark is still the Ally and the Ally X.
Yeah.
Right?
I wouldn't expect that for the Ally device that there would be backwards compatibility support. Certainly not initially, if ever. That would be a concern. I could see something down the line. Maybe they could work something out, get a 360 emulator, get an original Xbox emulator working on that device. I don't think you'd see anything from the Xbox One generation of devices. Certainly nothing from the Series generation of device that obviously well outstrips the capability of the Xbox Ally, unfortunately. But yeah, I would expect that we're going to see emulation throughout the stack, in part because I think Sarah Bond, when she came out and announced the next generation Xbox collaboration with AMD, she said that backwards compatibility would be a part of that vision. So I would expect that kind of statement, Xbox's long-standing commitment to backwards compatibility, I'd expect that would translate into full backwards compatibility throughout the stack. Obviously, accepting the fact that a lot of 360 games are not on the backwards compatibility program still, and the vast majority of original Xbox games are not supported under backwards compatibility. Hopefully that can change, but licensing issues and things like that, I can understand why that might still be a major sticking point. And certainly, I wouldn't necessarily expect an expanded program, but I would expect that program to land on the next generation Xbox devices.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Any final thoughts, John?
No, I think we've kind of covered the gamut here, and it's more just like a wait and see at this point.
Yes.
I like these rumors. I think this is a really interesting design. But there's just still so much we don't know about what the market's going to look like, and that's what's going to be most important here, I think.
Yeah, and also the way it's all messaged, because it is quite a fundamental shift, I think. And if these rumors concerning the Ally X price points are true, then it's going to possibly be a rude awakening to the traditional console audience. But at the same time, consoles are just expensive these days. When you look at what the Pro was priced at, the fact that meaningful price cuts to the current generation basically didn't happen. Yeah.
I don't think it would make any business sense for them to continue in the subsidized console model, because they're just not finding the success they need there. And Windows is already their baby. And that's where so many games are. So this makes a ton of sense for Microsoft to take this approach. And I think how it hits with consumers is all down to the messaging. It's a big change, so it's going to require it. But I actually think they're in a good spot for this, because the last year or so it's been kind of tricky for Xbox, I guess. Things seeming a little bit muddled, and there's some confusion around things, and the sudden shift to multi-platform and everything left people kind of like, what's going on with Xbox? Which is perfect. That's where you want to be when you're bringing a new project forward, I would say, like this. And it could allow them to come out looking very strong.